I found his notebook. I found his notebook, doctor. Sarah pulled a small spiral notebook from her bag and held it up like proof. Harold looked at it, then at her hand, and felt his jaw tighten. He had not known she took it, and he did not know how long she had been reading it. Harold Chen was 75 years old, a retired mechanical engineer who had spent most of his life fixing things that broke. He sat now in Dr. Peterson's office on a Tuesday morning in a hard chair that made his lower back ache, while his daughter placed his private notebook on a desk between them. His wife had been dead for 4 years. He had been retired for 2. Most days he woke at 6, made coffee, and sat at his kitchen table until noon with nothing to do and no one asking anything from him. He was here because Sarah had found the one thing that still made him feel useful, and she had decided it meant something was wrong. The office smelled like hand soap and old paper. A wall clock ticked louder than it should have. Harold could hear the soft hum from the vent above him. Sarah sat beside him with her purse on her lap and both hands around the notebook now, her fingers pressed too tight against the plastic cover. She was nervous. He could see it in the way her shoulders stayed raised and never dropped. Dr. Peterson leaned back in his chair and looked from Sarah to Harold. He did not reach for the notebook right away. "What's in it?" he asked. Sarah gave a short breath through her nose, like she had already gone over this too many times in her head. "He writes down problems people have," she said. "Strangers, then he tries to solve them." She opened the notebook and turned it so the doctor could see. Harold stared at the carpet. Sarah read from one page. "Mrs. Chen at the grocery store. Can't reach top shelf. Bring her a step stool." She turned another page. "Mailman limps on left side. Suggest he see a podiatrist." Her voice changed on the last word. It had a crack in it, small but there. Dr. Peterson took the notebook at last. He read quietly for a few seconds. Harold could hear the paper move under the doctor's fingers. Every page turn made the muscles in Harold's neck pull tighter. There were more notes in there. Little things. A cashier rubbing her wrist. A man outside the hardware store with a broken cane tip. A woman at the pharmacy squinting at a prescription label. Things people missed because they were in a hurry. Things Harold noticed because he was not. Dr. Peterson looked up. "Harold, can you tell me why you write these things down?" Harold sat back and folded his arms, though the position pinched his right shoulder. "Because I notice things," he said. "That's not a sickness." Sarah turned to him. "Dad, why are you writing about strangers?" He looked at her then, really looked at her. Her forehead was lined the way it got when she was worried, but there was something else there too. Shame, maybe, or fear. "Because they have problems I can solve," he said. His voice came out harder than he meant, but he did not pull it back. "I used to solve problems all day at work. Now I solve nothing. I just sit." Sarah's mouth opened, then closed again. She glanced at the doctor before speaking. "But you don't know these people, Dad. You're following them, writing about them." Harold felt heat rise from his chest to his face. His hands flattened on the arms of the chair. His fingers pressed so hard the tips hurt. "I'm not following anyone," he said. "I'm paying attention." The doctor stayed quiet. Sarah did not. "You were behind the same woman at the grocery store 3 times this week." "I shopped there." "You wrote down what kind of shoes the mailman wears." "Because his left foot rolls inward when he walks, and that kind of wear pattern matters." "Dad." "At home, though, no one needs me," Harold said, cutting across her. He heard his own voice fill the small room and did not care. "So I go where I can be useful." After that, no one spoke for a moment. The clock kept ticking. Someone laughed out in the hallway and then the sound was gone. Harold could feel his pulse in his neck. It was a strong, angry beat. He hated that Sarah had brought him here. He hated even more that part of him knew why. Last month, he had gone 3 full days without speaking to anyone. On the first day, it had felt almost peaceful. He made eggs, washed the pan, looked out the kitchen window. On the second day, the house had started sounding too large. The refrigerator kicked on. The pipes knocked once in the wall. A floorboard gave a soft pop near the hallway. He found himself turning toward those sounds as if someone had called him. On the third day, he said his own name out loud while reaching for a coffee mug, just to hear a human voice in the room. After that, he bought the notebook. At first, he only wrote down tasks. Change furnace filter. Tighten loose cabinet hinge. Ask pharmacy about refill. Then the notes changed. He started writing down things he noticed outside the house. Because outside the house, people still had problems, and problems could still be solved, even if nobody asked him. Dr. Peterson placed the notebook gently on his desk. "Harold," he said, "no one is saying you're crazy." Harold let out one short laugh without humor. "Then stop treating me like I am." Sarah looked down at her hands. The doctor nodded once. He had known Harold a long time. He knew when to push and when not to. "I'm not treating you like you're crazy," he said. "I'm trying to understand whether this is about memory, anxiety, loneliness, or something else." "It's about eyesight," Harold said. "Mine still works." Dr. Peterson leaned forward a little. "Would you be willing to do a simple memory test today? Just a few questions." Harold's whole body went still. His stomach pulled tight. His back pressed harder into the chair. He could feel the dry air in the room at the back of his throat. "No, it doesn't mean anything by itself," the doctor said. "It's just information." I said no. Sarah turned toward him again. "Dad, maybe if you just do it..." Harold snapped his head toward her. The movement sent a sting through his neck. "Why? So everyone can decide what to do with me? That's not fair." "No," he said. "You took my notebook." Her face changed then. The color dropped out of it. She looked caught. "I was worried," she said quietly. "You went through my things. I found it in your coat when I was hanging it up. You read all of it." She did not answer. Harold looked at the notebook on the desk. A cheap spiral pad with a bent corner and blue lines. It should not have mattered so much. But it did. It held the last private proof that his mind still moved toward the world instead of away from it. "Harold," Dr. Peterson said carefully, "maybe Sarah should step out for a minute." "No," Sarah said fast. Harold almost said yes, just to watch her reaction, but he was too tired all at once. The anger was still there, but under it was something heavier. He could feel it in his chest, like a weight sitting on his ribs. He looked at the doctor. "You want to know why I write things down?" Dr. Peterson waited. "Because if I don't," Harold said, slower now, "the day disappears. I wake up, I drink coffee, I sit, I heat something up for lunch. Then it's dark. Then I go to bed. That's not a day, that's waiting." Sarah's eyes lifted to him. Harold kept going because he had already started and could not stop now. "At work, people came to me because something was wrong, and I knew how to think it through. I could look at a machine, hear one bad sound, and know where to start. I could fix things, or help fix them. Now people tell me to rest." Sarah whispered, "You're retired. You're supposed to rest." Harold looked at her for a long second. "Rest?" he said. "I've been resting for 2 years. I'm tired of resting. I want to be useful." Sarah's throat moved when she swallowed. She looked like she might cry, but she didn't. She held herself very still instead, and Harold knew that posture. She had done it as a child when she was trying not to break in front of him. Dr. Peterson folded his hands. "Wanting purpose is not strange," he said. "Not at all. But writing down observations about strangers can worry people, especially if they think you're getting fixated." Harold shook his head. "Everybody keeps using words that make it sound worse than it is." "Then tell me what it is," the doctor said. Harold looked at the window behind the desk. The blinds were half closed. Bright morning light cut through in narrow stripes. "It's me trying not to disappear," he said. The room went quiet again. Sarah pressed her lips together. Her eyes went wet this time. She looked away first. Dr. Peterson spoke softly. "That makes sense to me." Harold gave him a sharp look, not because he disagreed, but because he did not want pity. The doctor saw it. "I'm not saying there's nothing to look at," he added. "I am saying I hear you." Harold looked down at his hands. The skin was thin now. The veins stood up blue beneath it. These were still good hands, steady hands, hands that remembered measurements and torque and the shape of every tool he had ever trusted. Hands that could still fix a drawer slide, sharpen a mower blade, change a faucet washer, show a kid how to hold a camera level. But in that room, on that morning, they looked to everyone else like old hands. Dr. Peterson slid the notebook back toward Sarah, then seemed to think better of it. He turned it instead and held it toward Harold. "This belongs to you," he said. Harold took it. The plastic cover was warm from the doctor's hand. He set it on his lap and rested one palm over it. "I'm not doing the memory test today," he said. "All right," said Dr. Peterson. Sarah looked at the doctor, surprised. "That's it?" "For today, yes." She stared at him. "So we just let this go?" Dr. Peterson's voice stayed calm. "No, we pay attention. There's a difference." Harold almost smiled at that, but he didn't. The appointment ended a few minutes later. Sarah stood first. She adjusted the strap of her purse with stiff, quick movements. Harold rose more slowly. His knees complained. A small crack ran through one of them when he straightened, and the sound seemed too loud in the quiet office. At the door, Sarah stopped and looked back at the doctor. "Should I be worried?" she asked. Dr. Peterson answered carefully. "I think your father is lonely. I think he is angry. I think he is trying to find a place for himself. If you notice confusion, getting lost, missed bills, trouble with words, tell me. But don't confuse pain with madness." Harold opened the door before Sarah could reply. The hallway felt cooler than the office. Sarah walked beside him toward the parking lot, her heels tapping fast on the tile. Harold kept the notebook under one arm. Neither of them spoke until they reached her car. "I was trying to help," she said. He looked at the windshield, not at her. "You were trying to manage me." "That's not true." "It is." She took a breath that shook in the middle. "I didn't know what to think when I read it." Harold opened the passenger door. "That's because you read it instead of asking me." He got in before she could answer. On the drive home, Sarah gripped the wheel at 10 and 2 like she was teaching a teenager. Harold watched storefronts pass by. A dry cleaner, a pet supply store, a diner with a handwritten sign in the window. He could have told her that the left brake light on the pickup in front of them was out. He could have told her the car behind them needed air in the front right tire. He could have told her the woman walking along the sidewalk was carrying too much in one hand and would likely drop the gallon of milk before she got to the corner. He said none of it. Sarah dropped him off at the house just before 11. He got out without asking if she wanted coffee. She stayed in the driveway a moment after he shut the door. Through the curtain, Harold saw her lift her phone. He knew who she would call. Inside the house, the silence met him at once. It always did. The kitchen still held the smell of the coffee he had made before the appointment. His mug was in the sink. One spoon sat beside it. The chair by the table was pushed halfway out, just where he had left it. He set the notebook down, then picked it up again and carried it to the table. He sat. The wood was cool under his forearms. After a minute, his phone rang. "Sarah." He let it ring twice before answering. "What?" Her voice was low. "I called Michael." Harold closed his eyes. "And?" he asked. "He says it's not normal," she said. "He says it's obsessive." Harold gave a tired breath through his nose. That sounded like Michael. Clean word, hard edge, easy to say from far away. "And David?" He said, "Maybe you're bored." Harold looked at the notebook in front of him, the bent corner, the cheap wire spiral, his own handwriting pressing through the paper. Maybe he was bored. Maybe boredom was too small a word for what happened to a man when his work ended. His wife died, and the world slowly stopped asking anything of him. Sarah was quiet on the line. He could hear traffic where she was, a turn signal clicking. "I don't know what to think," she said at last. Harold's hand rested on the notebook. "That makes two of us." But Sarah did know one thing by then, even if she did not say it out loud. He could hear it in her silence, in the way she had called both brothers already, in the way her voice kept tightening like a rope pulled inch by inch. She was going to watch him now. And Harold, sitting alone again at his kitchen table with the notebook under his hand, did not know whether to feel angry about that or relieved. "We can't watch him 24/7. "We can't watch him 24/7, Sarah." Michael said it with both hands flat on his knees, leaning forward like he was making a case in court. David stood near the window with his arms crossed so tight his shoulders looked stiff. Harold sat in his armchair with a photo album open on his lap and kept his eyes on an old picture of himself at a workbench. Because looking at the three of them felt worse. The living room was too warm with 4 people in it. The lamp beside Harold's chair gave off a yellow light that made the room feel smaller than usual. Saturday night had settled outside, dark against the front windows, but inside the house everything felt sharp and exposed. Harold could hear the refrigerator hum from the kitchen and the dry click in his left knee every time he shifted in the chair. Sarah sat on the couch, perched near the edge, her purse still on her shoulder, like she might need to leave fast. Michael had driven in that afternoon. David had come after closing up his business. They were all here because Sarah had called them, and now they were talking about Harold as if he were not in the room. Michael took a slow breath through his nose. "There's a place 20 minutes from here," he said. "It's nice. It's clean. They have activities, meals, staff on site, supervision. This doesn't have to be a bad thing." Harold turned a page in the album. There he was again, younger, standing beside a piece of equipment with the side panel open. He remembered that day. A bearing had gone bad and thrown off the whole line. Everyone else thought they would lose a full shift. He had listened to the machine for 10 seconds and known where to start. In the photo, he was not smiling, just focused, sleeves rolled up, pencil behind one ear. Useful, tired, but useful. David cleared his throat. "I agree with Michael." Harold kept looking at the photograph. David shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His boots made a soft sound on the rug. "I can't keep driving down here every time he does something weird," he said. "I have a business, 2 kids. Harold's thumb stayed pressed at the corner of the page. He could feel the rough paper against his skin. Sarah turned toward them so fast the couch cushion pushed out under her leg. "He's not doing anything illegal," she said. "He's just trying to help people." Michael looked at her, already tired of the argument. Harold could hear it in the way he exhaled before he spoke. "Help people how?" Michael said. "By writing down their problems like a stalker?" Harold's jaw tightened. The muscles near his ears started to ache. Sarah shook her head. He bought a step stool for an old lady. That's not crazy. Michael lifted one hand and let it fall again. He didn't know her. He watched her struggle and then brought her a gift. That's weird. Harold stared at the album, but he was no longer seeing the picture. He was seeing the grocery store aisle instead. Mrs. Chen standing there in a light blue sweater, stretching up on her toes, fingertips brushing the bottom of a cereal box she could not reach. He had seen her there twice before. The third time, he had spoken to her. The week after that, he brought her a small folding step stool from the hardware store. Cheap, sturdy, safe. She had put one hand over her chest and thanked him like he had handed her something much bigger. He turned one more page. There was another photo. Him in a hard hat. Another with grease on his hands. Another standing beside two men from his old team, all three of them holding coffee cups and looking half awake. Harold studied his own face in the picture. He knew exactly how his body had felt in those years. Sore feet by 6 o'clock. Shoulder knots that never fully went away. Fingertips rough from metal and tools. Head full of problems that needed answers by morning. It had been exhausting. It had also been a life. Michael's voice cut back in. Dad, say something. Harold did not look up. Sarah did. She looked at him and then back at her brothers. Maybe you two should stop talking about him like he's not here. Michael sat back, rubbed one hand over his mouth, and looked at Harold. Fine, Dad, I'm saying this to you. I think you need more support than we can give. David nodded once, but it looked weak now that he had to do it in front of Harold instead of beside Michael. We're not trying to be cruel. Harold finally lifted his head. Michael held his gaze for a second, then another. Harold saw what age had done to his eldest son, too. The lines at the corners of his eyes. The extra fullness under his chin. The way stress sat in his forehead now, even when he was quiet. David looked worse in a different way. Tired around the mouth, shirt still wrinkled from a long day. A father with no extra room in him for one more problem. Harold looked from one son to the other, then at Sarah, who seemed to be carrying both sides of the room inside her chest. Then he spoke. I fixed Mrs. Chen's shelf, he said. His voice was low, but every word came out clean. I bought her a step stool. She thanked me. That's not stalking. That's being a decent human being. He looked at all three of them now. Something you three forgot how to do. The room went still. Sarah's face changed first. A small hurt flickered through it. David looked down at the floor. Michael's mouth hardened. That's not fair, Michael said. Harold shut the album halfway and rested one hand over the cover. No, you're turning this into an attack. You came into my house to discuss supervision. Michael leaned forward again, elbows on knees. Because we're scared. Harold looked at him for a moment. He had not expected that word, not from Michael. But Michael kept going, faster now, as if once he started, he could not stop. You're writing down strangers, you're showing up places. Sarah found that notebook. The doctor is concerned, none of this is normal. Normal, Harold repeated. The word sat bitter in his mouth. David spoke toward the floor. Dad, you never told us you were lonely. Harold turned to him. There it was. The sentence he should have wanted. The opening. The place where someone might finally meet him honestly. But it came too late after the brochure research and the planning and the talk about facilities. It landed wrong. You never asked, Harold said. David looked up. Harold felt his chest tighten as he kept going. He could feel each breath more clearly now, like his ribs were working against something heavy. You call once a week for 5 minutes. That's not a conversation, that's a checklist. David's face flushed. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Sarah pressed both palms together between her knees. That's not true every time. Harold looked at her. Close enough. She dropped her eyes. Michael stood up and began to pace 2 slow steps toward the fireplace and back again. Harold watched him from the chair. Michael always moved when he was angry. As a boy, he had done the same thing in smaller rooms, with smaller problems. Now his body looked contained, controlled, but the tension was in him all the same. His shoulders were high. One hand kept opening and closing at his side. His face had gone pale under the living room light. We are trying to figure out how to keep you safe, Michael said. Harold gave a dry laugh. Safe from what? From yourself. The words hit hard enough that Harold felt them in his stomach. He looked down at the album again, not because he wanted the pictures now, but because he did not want them to see what crossed his face. The page in front of him showed a photo Sarah had taken years ago. Harold kneeling in the driveway, helping David's son tighten training wheels on a bike. Harold's head bent down, small wrench in hand. Child waiting. Problem, solution, need. That was how families once worked. Do you hear yourself? Sarah asked Michael. Michael stopped pacing. Yes, I do. No, you don't, she said. You're talking like he's already gone. Michael looked at her with that lawyer's patience he used when he thought someone else was being emotional. Sarah, this is exactly the problem. You keep softening everything, and you keep turning everything into a case file. David rubbed the back of his neck. Can we not do this? Sarah turned to him. You said maybe he was bored. David's shoulders dropped a little. Maybe he is. Harold looked at him. David at least had the decency to sound unsure. Michael walked to the coffee table and set down a folded brochure. The glossy paper made a flat slap against the wood. Golden Meadows Assisted Living, he said. Just look at it. Harold's eyes moved to it and then away. He did not touch it. Sarah stared at the brochure like it had appeared there on its own. You brought that with you? Michael did not answer right away, which was answer enough. The room changed then. Harold could feel it. Whatever little chance there had been that this was just a family talk was gone. Michael had arrived with a plan already printed and folded. David saw it too. He rubbed both hands over his face, then lowered them slowly. Mike. What? Michael snapped. What was I supposed to do? Come here with nothing? Sarah stood up from the couch. The motion was sudden enough that Harold flinched inside, though he did not move. You were supposed to come here and listen. I have listened. No, you decided. Michael looked at Harold again. This time there was anger, but there was something else under it now. Shame, maybe, or fear. His voice came out tighter than before. He is 75 years old. He's alone all day. He's writing notes about strangers. He told a doctor he feels invisible. What do you want me to do with that? Sarah's own voice rose. Maybe start by hearing what he actually said. Harold let them go on for a few seconds. His chest felt tired. Not weak, just tired. The kind of tired that sat behind the breastbone and spread down through the arms. He rested both hands on the closed album and looked at the old pictures beneath the thin plastic sleeves. He had not told them everything. He had not told them about the mornings that stretched so long he watched sunlight crawl across the kitchen floor. He had not told them that some afternoons he opened the garage just to hear a different kind of quiet. He had not told them that he sometimes wrote his own name in the notebook, slowly just to see it there in ink. Harold Chen, Harold Chen, Harold Chen. As if repetition could hold a person in place. Sarah was still talking. He is not dangerous. He is not confused. He is trying to matter to somebody. Michael turned on her. And what happens when somebody calls the police because an old man has been observing them for a week? Harold's head came up again. Why? He said. Because I'm old? All three of them looked at him. If a young person did that, Harold said, you'd call them a good neighbor. No one answered at first. Then David said, quieter than before, Dad, that's not really the same. Harold looked at him until David dropped his eyes again. Michael reached for the brochure and pushed it a little closer across the table. No one is trying to punish you. This place has people your age. Meals, programs, card games, exercise classes. Harold almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. Card games. Michael's face tightened. Don't do that. Do what? Make this impossible. Harold sat up a little straighter in the chair. His spine protested. A hot line of pain ran up the center of his back and settled between his shoulders. He let it sit there. He wanted to feel every part of this. You know what's impossible, he said? Sitting in a room full of your own children and hearing them discuss where to put you. Sarah closed her eyes for 1 second. David spoke before Michael could. That's not what this is. Harold turned to him. Then what is it? David had no answer ready. His throat moved when he swallowed. He looked younger in that moment, not because of his face, but because of the helplessness in it. Michael did answer. This is us trying to deal with a problem before it gets worse. Harold nodded once. There it is. Michael frowned. What? A problem. Harold tapped one finger on the photo album. That's what I am now. No one said that. You didn't have to. Michael looked away first. The silence that followed sat heavy in the room. No television on. No dishes clinking. No traffic close enough to soften the edges. Just 4 people breathing in one house and failing to reach each other. Sarah lowered herself back onto the couch slowly this time. She looked tired down to the bones. Dad, she said, softer now. I'm sorry. Harold looked at her. For what? He asked. She looked at the album on his lap instead of his face. I don't know, she said. For not seeing it sooner. For making it worse. Maybe both. Michael let out a frustrated breath and reached for his car keys from the side table. The metal clicked in his hand. I'm not doing this all night. No one asked you to, Harold said. Michael gave a short nod, more to himself than anyone else. He stepped toward the door, then stopped and looked back, not at Harold, but at Sarah. "When something else happens," he said, "don't call me like I'm overreacting." Sarah did not answer. David lingered where he was. He looked from Harold to Sarah to the brochure on the coffee table. Then he bent, picked up the brochure, and for 1 second, Harold thought he might take it with him. But David set it back down. "I should go too," he said. His voice sounded rough now. He moved toward Harold's chair, then stopped halfway there, unsure whether to come closer. "Dad," he said, He could not finish. Harold looked at him and waited. David's eyes were wet, though nothing fell. He gave one helpless nod and left it there. Then Michael opened the front door, and cool night air slipped briefly into the warm room. A second later, both sons were gone. The house fell quiet again. Sarah stayed on the couch. Harold stayed in his chair. No one touched the brochure. After a while, Sarah said, "They're scared." Harold looked down and opened the album again. Another old work photo. Him standing beside a machine with one hand resting on the frame, head turned towards someone outside the shot. He tried to remember who had taken that picture. He couldn't. "I'm scared too," Sarah said. Harold kept looking at the photo. He could hear the small strain in her breathing, the guilt in it, the effort it took for her not to cry. He could hear his own breath too, slower now, but still heavy in his chest. "Dad," she said after a moment, "can you look at me?" He did not. Not because he was trying to hurt her, because he was afraid that if he looked at her too soon, all the anger would drop out of him at once and leave something worse behind. So he kept his eyes on the old pictures, on the man in work boots, on the man with a wrench in his hand, on the man everyone used to call when something needed fixing. Sarah looked at him for a long time. Then she looked at the coffee table, at the untouched brochure for Golden Meadows Assisted Living, and then back at her father, who still had not reached for it, who was still sitting there with an old photo album on his lap like it was the only place left where his life made immediate sense. And for the first time that night, the question came to her in a way it had not before. When did we stop seeing him? "I just want to be useful." "Harold?" Emma looked up from the attendance sheet with a pen in her hand. Harold raised his hand fast, almost like a schoolboy, and said, "Here." It came out louder than he meant it to. A few people in the room laughed softly, not in a cruel way, but enough to make heat rise into his face. The classroom at the community center was bright and a little too cold. The folding chair under Harold made his hips ache after only 10 minutes, and the metal edge pressed against the back of his thighs. On the table in front of him sat a borrowed camera and a photocopied handout with words he did not fully understand. Wednesday night, beginner photography. 10 students, most of them younger than his children. Emma, the teacher, stood at the front in jeans and a dark sweater, one hand resting on the table beside her laptop. Harold had signed up because the flyer said no experience needed. But that was not the real reason he had come. He had come because a room full of people still felt better than a dark house. Emma smiled once at him, then kept going down the list. When class started, she began talking about aperture and shutter speed. She held up a camera and explained how light worked, how one setting affected the other, how the picture changed depending on what you chose. Harold listened hard. He really did. But after a few minutes, the words began to slide past each other in his head. F-stop, exposure, motion blur. He looked down at the buttons on the camera in front of him and felt the old, unpleasant irritation of not knowing something quickly. He hated that feeling. Not because he needed to be the smartest person in the room, because for most of his life, when something confused him, he could usually take it apart, study it, and find the logic. Here, the logic kept moving. Emma walked between the rows, talking while she moved. "Try switching from automatic to manual," she said. "Then adjust the dial and watch what changes." Harold pressed one button. Nothing useful happened. He pressed another. The screen flashed something and went dark again. Beside him, a young woman made a low sound in her throat and stared at her own camera screen like it had insulted her. She had been doing that for the last 5 minutes. First tapping, then turning something too fast, then squinting and shaking her head. Harold could see her shoulders getting tighter with each try. He stopped looking at his own camera and watched her hands instead. "How did you know my camera was on the wrong setting?" she would ask him later, but the answer was already there. He knew because she kept looking at the screen like it was lying to her. He had seen that look before. He had worn it himself at work when a machine reading made no sense and the real problem had to be somewhere underneath it. He leaned a little toward her. His lower back pulled when he did. "You're on P mode," he said quietly. "Switch to M, then turn this dial." She blinked at him. "What?" He pointed, careful not to touch the camera. "There, M, then that dial." She followed his finger, moved the setting, then turned the wheel once, twice. The screen changed. She looked down, then up at him. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God," she said. "Thank you." The sound of her relief did something direct to Harold's chest. It loosened it. Emma glanced over from the front of the room, but kept teaching. The young woman let out a breath and smiled at him now, open and surprised. "Seriously, thank you." Harold nodded once. "You're welcome." For the first time since class had started, the chair did not feel quite so hard. Emma gave them a short exercise and told everyone to test a few settings before the break. Around the room came the sounds of buttons clicking, camera straps sliding across tables, people muttering to themselves. Harold still did not fully understand what aperture actually meant in a photographer's mouth, but now he watched faces instead of menus. Confused student, frustrated student, student pretending to understand. Those things made sense to him. A young man 2 seats over turned his camera upside down, frowned at it, and then looked toward Harold. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice low, "can you show me what she meant about the dial?" Harold turned in his chair. The movement made his knee give a short, sharp complaint. He ignored it. "Which part? This thing keeps changing, and I don't know if I'm making it worse." Harold took his time looking at the screen, then he pointed. "You're changing 2 things at once. Start with 1. The young man adjusted it, then nodded slowly. "Okay, yeah, that helps." A few minutes later, another student leaned in from the aisle. "Can I ask you something?" Harold looked up. She held out her camera a little. "Mine won't focus when I move." He looked at the screen, at her grip, at the way she was pressing halfway, and then giving up too soon. "Try holding still for 1 second longer before you take it." She did. The camera beeped. "Oh," she said, that was it." By the time Emma called for a 10-minute break, 3 people had asked Harold for help. He stood up slowly from the folding chair. His legs felt stiff from sitting. Pins and needles ran through his right foot for the first few seconds, then eased. Around him, students stretched, checked their phones, and drifted toward the coffee station at the back. The young woman beside him was still smiling. "You're really good at this," she said. Are you a teacher?" Harold gave a small shake of his head. "No." "Then how do you know all this?" He almost said that he didn't. Not really, not photography. But that was not exactly true either. He knew enough. More than enough for the problem in front of him. "I'm just a retired engineer," he said, "who misses being useful." The words sat between them for a moment. The young woman's face softened. Not with pity, with understanding. "Well," she said, "you helped me." Harold nodded and looked down at his hands. They were steady. He noticed that first. Then he noticed the other thing. The heavy pressure that usually lived under his ribs in the evening was lighter. Not gone, just lighter. Emma came over during the break with a paper cup in her hand. Up close, she looked younger than he first thought. 28, maybe. Clear eyes, sharp attention. The kind of person who listened with her whole face. "You didn't come here to learn photography, did you?" she asked. She said it quietly, not accusing him, not smiling. Harold looked at her, then at the students around the room. 2 of them were still fiddling with settings. Another was showing someone else a picture on the back screen. The room had the soft noise of people trying. "No," he said. Emma waited. Harold shifted his weight. His back was warm from standing, and one shoulder still held the stiffness from sleeping wrong the night before. "No," he said again. "I came to be seen, to be needed." Emma did not interrupt. "At home," he said. "I'm invisible." She took that in without looking away. "That's all I ever wanted to be," he added. "A helper. But my kids won't let me help them anymore." Emma leaned one hip against the table behind her. "So you help strangers?" Harold gave one short nod. "Strangers at least look at me when I speak," he said. Emma glanced around the room, then back at him. "You're not a student," she said. "You're a helper." The words landed harder than he expected. He felt them in his throat first, then lower, like something easing open inside his chest that had stayed shut too long. He looked down so she would not see too much on his face. When class started again, Emma changed the exercise. She did not say it was for him, but Harold knew. She told the students to pair up and help each other adjust settings before taking pictures. Almost at once, hands went up. "Can you look at mine?" "Wait, what did she say about exposure? Why is mine too dark?" Harold answered what he could. He did not rush. He spoke the way he used to at work when a younger employee stood beside him, frustrated and embarrassed and trying not to show it. One step at a time, one change at a time. Don't pile confusion on top of confusion. The young man from earlier grinned after finally getting a clear shot. "There we go." Harold felt that grin almost like a physical thing, a passing current, simple, human, real. Another student asked, "How did you know my camera was on the wrong setting?" Harold said, "Because you kept looking at the screen like it was lying to you. That's what I do when I'm stuck." The student laughed. That is exactly what it felt like. Across the room, Emma heard that and smiled to herself. By the end of class, Harold still could not have explained aperture in a clean textbook way. But he had helped 5 people do what they came there to do. He had watched panic leave shoulders, watched confusion turn into relief, watched people look at him and wait for his answer. That mattered more. When the students started packing up, one by one, they thanked him on the way out. Not everyone, just enough. "Thanks again. See you next week. You saved me tonight." Each one left a small mark on him. Not a wound, the opposite, a kind of return. Emma was stacking handouts when Harold came up to the front table to return the borrowed camera. His knees were sore now from standing and sitting too many times, and he could feel the tired pull at the base of his spine. But it was good tired. Work tired. Use your body tired. Emma took the camera from him. "You can come anytime," she said. Harold looked at her. "Even if you don't want to learn," she said. "My students need you." For 1 second, Harold could not speak. Then he nodded. "All right," he said. He left the community center with his hands in his coat pockets. The night air was cold enough to wake his skin at once. It touched his cheeks and the bridge of his nose and made his eyes water a little. He walked home slowly under the streetlights, feeling the pull in his calves, the old ache in one knee, the steady beat of blood in his hands from the cold. But inside him something was quieter than usual. The house was dark when he opened the door. He stepped into the kitchen and stood still for a moment. Refrigerator hum, clock on the stove. No voices, no footsteps, no one asking anything. Usually the silence hit first. Tonight the memory of voices came in with him. He turned on the small light over the sink, sat at the kitchen table, and pulled out his notebook. The spiral edge pressed lightly into the heel of his hand as he opened it. He could still feel the classroom in his body, the stiffness in his legs, the warmth that had stayed in his chest all the way home, the faint soreness in his fingers from gripping the camera too tightly at first. He wrote slowly, carefully, in his plain block handwriting. "Today I was useful. Tomorrow I will be again." Then he sat there with the pen still in his hand, looking at the words until the room stopped feeling quite so empty. He's teaching the class. Sarah stood in her kitchen with her phone still in her hand and the coffee going cold beside the sink. Morning light came in hard through the window over the counter, showing every crumb, every school paper, every small thing she had not put away yet. She had called Emma 10 minutes earlier just to check on Harold. Now her heart was still beating too fast because what Emma told her had not sounded like a man slipping. It had sounded like a man coming back to life. Emma had told her everything. Harold had gone to the class. He had sat there like any other student at first. Then someone next to him got stuck, and he helped. Then another student asked him something. Then another. By the middle of class, people were going to him with their cameras, their questions, their confused faces. Emma had laughed once on the phone when she said it. "He's teaching the class," she had told Sarah. "Not officially, but yes, they love him." Sarah had leaned against the counter so hard the edge pressed into her lower back. "He's what?" "He helps them when they get frustrated. He's calm, he notices things. Honestly, he's good for them." Now she had Michael on speaker. There was a pause on the line after she finished telling him. Not a thoughtful pause, a tight one. Then Michael said, "So he's taking over someone else's class? That's not better, that's worse." Sarah closed her eyes for 1 second. Her grip on the phone tightened until the muscles in her wrist hurt. "Why is that worse? He's helping people." Michael let out a breath that sounded like he was trying not to lose patience. "Because he's doing it behind our backs. He didn't tell us." Sarah pushed away from the counter and started pacing the kitchen, bare feet on cool tile. One hand pressed flat against her stomach. "Maybe he didn't tell us because he knew you'd react like this." Michael was quiet for half a beat. Sarah kept going before he could cut in. "He's helping young people, Michael. They come to him with questions. He was never patient with us." The words landed harder than she expected. Sarah stopped walking. For a second, she just stood there, staring at the fruit bowl on the table without seeing it. She could feel the old pull of that sentence. Childhood. Harold tired after work. Harold quiet at dinner, Harold fixing things in the garage, instead of talking about feelings because feelings were never the language he had spoken best. But even as Michael said it, Sarah knew it was only part of the truth. "Because we never asked him for help," she said. Her voice came out lower now, steadier. "We just told him what to do." "That's not fair." Sarah gave a short, tired laugh with no humor in it. "Neither is putting him in a home because he wants to be useful." On the other end of the line, Michael did not answer right away. She could picture him doing what he always did when he got cornered emotionally. One hand on his hip, jaw tight. Looking out a window, like the right argument might be written somewhere outside, Sarah leaned both hands on the kitchen table. The wood edge bit into her palms. Her shoulders were tight all the way up into her neck. Emma's voice was still in her head. He didn't come there to learn photography. He came to be needed. Sarah looked down at the table and saw, all at once, how many times they had mistaken pain for a problem to manage. Harold wasn't wandering. He wasn't confused. He wasn't trying to scare anyone. He was going where people still looked relieved when he spoke. Michael finally said, "You're getting too close to this." Sarah almost laughed again. Too close. He meant emotional. He meant messy. He meant not clean enough for him. "No," she said. "I'm finally looking at it." Michael's voice sharpened. "Sarah, you're acting like this proves he's fine." "I didn't say that." "Then what are you saying?" She straightened slowly. Her back gave a small ache from bending over the table. "I'm saying maybe we've been asking the wrong question." Silence again. Then Michael said, "Witches?" Sarah looked out the kitchen window. A neighbor was dragging a trash bin to the curb. Somewhere outside, a dog barked twice and stopped. "Not, how do we control him?" she said. "Maybe the question is, why does he need strangers more than he needs us?" Michael let out a breath through his nose. "That sounds nice," he said, "but it doesn't change the facts." Sarah felt heat climb up the back of her neck. "What facts?" "He's hiding things. He's going places. He's attaching himself to people who don't know him. He's helping them. He didn't tell us." That part again. That was where Michael kept coming back. Not the class, not the students, not the fact that Harold had walked into a room and become useful there within one night. What bothered Michael was that it happened outside his control. Sarah understood that suddenly, and once she saw it, she could not unsee it. "He didn't tell us," she said, "because none of us made it safe for him to tell us." Michael went quiet again. This time the quiet was different. She could almost hear the shift in him, small but real. Not agreement, not yet. But the first crack in certainty. When he spoke again, his voice was flatter, more careful. "I'm coming down next week. I want to see this for myself." Sarah closed her eyes and pressed 2 fingers against the bridge of her nose. A headache had started there sometime during the call. "Of course you do. I mean it. I know. I want to know exactly what's going on." Sarah looked at the clock above the stove. Thursday morning. Next class was next Wednesday night. If Michael came first, he would walk into that room already ready to judge it, ready to turn it into evidence, ready to prove something. She thought of Harold sitting there, among people half his age, speaking up because someone needed help. She thought of Emma's tone when she said, "My students need him." A fresh wave of guilt moved through Sarah, heavy and physical. It sat under her ribs and made her breathing feel tight. She had found the notebook. She had called the doctor. She had called her brothers. And all that time, Harold had been building himself a reason to leave the house. "I'm going before you," she said. Michael paused. "What?" "To the next class. I'm going myself." "For what?" "To see him there with my own eyes." Michael made a low sound, not quite approval, not quite annoyance. "Fine." Sarah could already feel it. The decision settling into place. Hard, clear, necessary. She would go. Not to catch him, not to report back. To see him. Michael spoke again, quieter now. "Sarah." "What?" "If this is as bad as I think it is, don't minimize it." Sarah held the phone tighter. "And if it's not as bad as you think it is, don't make it worse." Neither of them spoke after that. A second later, Michael said goodbye in the clipped voice he used when he had more to say but no safe place to put it, and the line went dead. Sarah lowered the phone and stood still in the kitchen. The room suddenly felt too quiet. The coffee maker had stopped. The house had that Thursday morning stillness of an ordinary day, but nothing inside her felt ordinary. She stared at the dark screen of her phone, then set it down on the table. Her chest still felt tight from the call. Her stomach felt hollow. But under both of those things was something else, new and stubborn and impossible to ignore. She needed to see who her father was in that room. Not the version from Michael's fear. Not the version from the notebook. Not the version from a doctor's office or a brochure for assisted living. The real one. Sarah picked up her coffee, took a sip, and winced. It was cold. She set the mug back down and looked toward the window again. Though she was no longer seeing the street outside, she was seeing Harold in a classroom full of strangers, leaning towards someone who was stuck, speaking in that quiet, exact way of his, and being answered with relief instead of worry. For the first time since she had found the notebook, she wanted proof of something other than damage. Next Wednesday, before Michael came, she would go to the class herself. "You saved me." Jess was crying in the corner before class even ended, trying hard not to make noise and failing anyway. Harold saw her shoulders shaking first, then the way she kept wiping under her eyes with the heel of her hand like she was angry at herself for doing it. Around her, the room still had the usual sounds of Wednesday night at the community center. Chairs scraping, camera bags zipping, Emma reminding people about the final project due in 2 days. But that one small corner felt cut off from the rest of it. Harold stood still for a second, with his camera hanging from its strap against his chest. The room was warm, but the back of his neck felt cool. He had seen that kind of crying before. Not loud, not dramatic, the kind that came from someone holding too much inside their body for too long. Jess was 22, all quick hands and nervous energy, usually the one who laughed too fast when she got embarrassed. Tonight she looked folded in on herself. Her final project notes were spread across the table in front of her, but she was staring past them. Her face was red. Her breathing kept catching in the middle. Emma noticed too, but she was across the room helping 2 other students pack up lights and extension cords. She looked over once, concern already in her face, but Harold was closer, so he walked over. His knees gave a dull ache with each step. The classroom floor always felt harder at the end of the night. He stopped beside Jess's chair and didn't say anything at first. He just pulled out the chair next to her and sat down. The metal seat was cold through his pants. His back tightened when he lowered himself, and the camera strap pressed awkwardly across his shoulder. He shifted once, settled, and kept his hands quiet on his thighs. Jess wiped her face again and let out one shaky breath. "Sorry," she muttered, though she was not looking at him. Harold shook his head. "Don't apologize." That only made her cry harder for a second. Not louder, just deeper. The kind of crying that made her chest work too hard. She looked at the papers in front of her and said, "I don't know what to shoot. Everything feels fake." Harold looked at the papers too. There were words written down, crossed out, written again. Identity, light, home, memory. They meant nothing in the way they were sitting there. He did not try to comfort her. He had learned a long time ago that some pain got smaller if you talked around it, but some pain only got honest when someone sat close enough not to run from it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his notebook. The spiral edge caught for a second on the lining before it came free. The cover was bent at one corner now. The pages inside had been opened and closed so many times they no longer lay flat. He rested it on the table between them and flipped through until he found the page he wanted. Jess sniffed and looked over, confused. Harold turned the notebook toward her. Across the page in his plain block handwriting, his name was written again and again. Harold Chen, Harold Chen, Harold Chen. Some lines were darker than others. Some letters were pressed so hard the ink had bled through. A few names were smeared where his hand had dragged across them before the page dried. Jess looked down at it for a long second. Then she looked up at him. Harold kept his voice even. "This is what I'm afraid of losing," he said. "My name, my existence." Jess's mouth parted, but no sound came out. He tapped the page once with one finger. "Shoot something you're afraid of losing." She stared at the notebook again. This time when the tears came, they changed. They were not just frustration now. They came from somewhere lower, somewhere she had been trying not to touch. "Like what?" she whispered. Harold looked at the page, then back at her. "Like this, my name. I write it because I'm scared no one will remember me." Jess pressed both hands over her mouth. "That's so sad," she said, and her voice broke on the last word. Harold nodded once, and it's honest. The room around them had gone quieter, or maybe it only felt that way to him. He could hear the soft hum of the overhead lights, the rustle of someone packing lenses at the back, Jess's breathing catching again and again. "And honesty," he said, "is what makes a good photo." Jess lowered her hands slowly. Her eyes were wet and bright and scared. Harold recognized that look too. It was the look people got right before they said the thing they had been carrying alone. "My mom has cancer," she said. The words landed plain and hard. Harold felt them in his chest. Not surprise, more like recognition. A direct understanding of the weight of a simple sentence, spoken out loud at last. Jess looked down at the notebook because she could not hold his eyes while she said the rest. "I'm scared of losing her." Harold sat very still. His hands were folded loosely now, but he could feel the pulse in them. He knew better than to rush the next part. This was where people often filled the air with soft words because silence felt cruel. But soft words were not always useful words. So he waited one beat, two. Then he said, "Then go home and take her picture." Jess blinked. "What?" "Tonight." She shook her head quickly. "No, I can't just..." "Yes, you can." Tears ran again, but she did not wipe them this time. "I don't want it to be some sad cancer photo." Harold looked at her hard enough that she met his eyes again. "Then don't make it pretty," he said. "Make it real." Jess held still. Not a pretty picture, Harold said. A real one. Her mouth trembled. She doesn't have to pose, he added. She doesn't have to smile. Take the picture the way the moment really is. Her sitting in her chair, her hands, her face when she's tired, her looking at you. Don't wait until you're ready. Go tonight. Jess started crying again, but now there was movement in it. Not stuck pain, something opening. Emma had come closer by then. Harold saw her in the edge of his vision, standing a few feet away with one hand still holding a stack of handouts against her hip. She didn't interrupt. Jess looked at the notebook one more time, then at Harold. You really write your name over and over? She asked softly. Harold gave a small nod. He could feel the old embarrassment of the truth in his throat, but it was lighter tonight than it had been the first time he said it out loud. Yes, because you're scared no one will remember you? Yes. Jess drew in a shaky breath that lifted her shoulders high, then let it out slowly. My mom used to write our names on all our lunch bags when I was a kid, she said, even when we knew which one was ours. Harold listened. She said names matter. Jess whispered. They do, Harold said. For a second, Jess just looked at him. Then suddenly she leaned forward and wrapped both arms around him. The hug caught him off guard. His body went stiff first out of surprise. Her shoulder pressed into his chest. One of her hands landed between his shoulder blades. He could feel how hard she was breathing. He could feel her crying against him, warm and shaking and young. Then he lifted one hand and rested it lightly against her back. He had not held anyone like that in a long time. Her sweater was soft under his palm. The bones in her shoulders felt too sharp. He could feel his own eyes sting, though nothing fell. Thank you, Jess said into his shirt. You saved me. Harold swallowed. His throat felt thick. His chest felt full in a way that almost hurt. Not bad hurt. Just too much feeling in one place after too many quiet nights. You're the one taking the picture, he said, his voice rougher now. Just don't wait. Jess pulled back and wiped her face again. This time she was breathing hard, but steadier. She nodded once, then again like she was making a promise to herself. I'm going tonight, she said. Good. Emma finally stepped all the way over. She looked at Jess first. You okay? Jess gave a shaky laugh and nodded, and even though fresh tears still stood in her eyes. Yeah, she said. No. But yes. I know what I'm doing now. Emma's eyes moved to Harold, then to the open notebook on the table, then back to Harold's face. She understood more than he wanted to explain. The other students had gone mostly quiet by then. A few were still packing up, but they were looking over now, aware that something important had happened, even if they had not heard every word. Emma straightened and looked at the room. Before everybody leaves, she said, raising her voice just enough, I want to say something. The last bit of movement in the classroom slowed. Emma rested one hand on the back of an empty chair. Harold isn't just a student, she said. He's the reason that this class works. Harold felt heat rise into his face at once. A few students smiled, one nodded, another said, It's true. Jess, still blotchy and tear-streaked, looked at him and gave the smallest, fiercest nod of all. Harold glanced down at the notebook because he suddenly did not know where else to look. His hands looked old again there on the table, broad and lined and marked by years of work. But for once, they did not feel like the hands of someone put away from the world. They felt like his hands. Useful hands. Hands that had just done what they were made to do. Class ended slowly after that. Jess packed her camera with new urgency in her movements. No more blank staring. No more frozen tears. She was still upset, but her body had direction again. Emma kept giving her small looks, checking without hovering. The other students said goodnight to Harold on their way out, and every one of them sounded a little warmer than before. By the time he left, the community center hallway smelled faintly of floor cleaner and cold night air drifting in every time the front door opened. Harold buttoned his coat with stiff fingers. His knuckles always felt the cold first. Outside, the night bit at his cheeks and made his eyes water. He walked home at his usual pace, feeling the pull in his calves, the ache in his right hip, the slight soreness in his chest from having held himself together too tightly in that room. But under all of that was something steady, valued. He did not say the word to himself. He did not need to. His body knew it first. When he got home, the house was dark and quiet, same as always. He turned on the kitchen light. The bulb over the sink buzzed once before settling. He hung up his coat, set the notebook on the table, and stood there for a moment, with one hand resting on the chair back. Usually, this was the hour when the silence got bigger. Usually, this was when he opened the notebook and wrote his name again, just to see it there and prove he had passed through another day. Tonight, he pulled out the chair and sat down, but he did not reach for the pen. His hand stayed flat on the table. He looked at the notebook, at the bent cover, at the page edges darkened by use, at all the names he had written to keep himself from fading in his own mind. Then he left it closed. Because for a few hours that night, in a room full of younger people with cameras in their hands and too much fear in their chests, Harold had not felt close to disappearing. For a few hours, he had felt like he mattered. He's not the problem. Sarah had been standing outside the classroom window for almost 2 hours, and by the end of it, her legs felt numb from the cold and her jaw hurt from holding it tight. She had come to watch without being seen. At first, she told herself she was only there to check, to make sure Emma had not exaggerated, to make sure Michael was wrong for the right reasons, not the wrong ones. Then she saw her father. Not the father from his living room chair. Not the father who sat at the kitchen table with the TV off and the lights low. Not the father who answered questions with one line and then went quiet again. This Harold moved toward people. He leaned in when someone looked confused. He waited when they got embarrassed. He watched their hands, their faces, their screens. He noticed things before they asked. Sarah had seen him do it all through her childhood with broken toasters, crooked fence gates, loose cabinet doors, bikes, lamps, garden hoses, stuck windows. But she had never seen him do it with people. Not like this. Not with this much patience in his face. She watched him help one student, then another. Watched the room begin to turn toward him without anyone naming it out loud. By the time Jess broke down in the corner, Sarah's chest already felt too tight. Then she saw Harold walk over. He did not rush. He did not act scared of Jess's tears. He sat beside her the way people sat beside pain when they were not trying to fix it too fast. Sarah pressed one hand flat against the cold brick outside the window and watched her father take out the notebook. The notebook. Even from outside, she knew it by the bent cover. She could not hear every word through the glass, but she saw Harold turn the page. Saw Jess look down. Saw her whole face change. Saw Harold speak. Saw Jess cry harder. Then differently. Then lean forward and hug him like he had pulled her back from some edge Sarah could not see. That was when Sarah started crying. Not loud, not enough for anyone inside to notice. Just tears slipping down her face while she stood there in the dark with her coat pulled tight across her chest and the wind needling through the gap at her collar. When class finally ended and the students began to leave, Sarah stepped back from the window and wiped under her eyes with both hands. Her fingers were cold. Her nose hurt from the night air. She could hear the front door of the community center open and close, each time spilling out a little warm light and a little warm sound. She waited until Harold was gone. Then Emma came out. Emma spotted her right away under the yellow light near the entrance. She shut the door behind her and stopped on the top step. For 1 second, neither of them spoke. Sarah knew what she looked like. Eyes swollen, face wet, arms folded too tight across her body. Like someone who had come to confirm a fear and found something much harder instead. Emma came down the steps slowly. "You were here the whole time?" Sarah nodded. Her throat hurt when she swallowed. "I never see him like that at home," she said. Her voice came out raw from holding too much in. "At home, he just sits. He doesn't smile." Emma looked back toward the building once, then at Sarah again. Her face changed. The softness in it was there, but so was anger. And Sarah could tell at once that it was not random anger. It was the kind that came from seeing someone hurt over and over. Because at home, Emma said, no one needs him. Here, everyone does. The sentence went straight through Sarah. She looked down at the parking lot, at the cracks in the pavement catching light from the street lamp. Her breathing was still uneven from crying, the cold air scraping the back of her throat. "We thought we were helping," she said. "Cooking for him, cleaning, driving him places, making things easier." Emma let out one short breath through her nose. "You weren't helping," she said. "You were making him invisible." Sarah looked up fast. The words hit hard enough that her body reacted before her mind did. Her stomach tightened. Her shoulders pulled up. Even her hands curled into themselves inside her sleeves. "That's harsh," she said. Emma did not back away from it. "It's true." Sarah stared at her. Emma took one step closer, just enough that her voice dropped and Sarah had to really hear it. "Your dad fixed a girl's whole outlook tonight," she said. He showed her his notebook, the one with his name. Sarah felt the blood leave her face. "He writes his name because he's scared of being forgotten," she said. Emma shook her head once. "No, he writes it because he's already been forgotten by you." Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. For one awful second, she wanted to argue. Wanted to say that she called, that she came by, that she brought groceries, that she took him to appointments, that she was the only one who really showed up. But those things suddenly felt smaller than they had 10 seconds earlier. Because she had seen him through the window. seen what happened to his whole body when someone needed him, the way he sat straighter, the way his face changed, the way people looked relieved when he spoke. She had not done that for him in years. None of them had. "When's the last time you asked him for advice?" Emma asked. "For help with anything?" Sarah looked away. The answer should have come quickly if it had been recent. Instead, her mind went blank. She saw random things: her own broken garbage disposal, a bookshelf her son-in-law fixed, a leaky faucet she paid someone to handle, school printer problems, a stubborn cabinet hinge, a flat tire, a dead battery. Every small household thing she had solved by either doing it herself or hiring someone or telling Harold not to worry about it. "I don't remember," she said. Emma nodded once. "That's my point." Sarah pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes until bright pressure built there. When she lowered them, her lashes were wet again. "He told me," Emma said, and now her voice was quieter but no less direct. "He said, 'My kids don't look at me anymore. They look through me.' That did it." Sarah bent forward a little, one hand braced on her knee because the force of it seemed to go right through her chest and into her legs. She felt suddenly weak and hot and cold at the same time. Tears came harder now, not the careful kind. Her face twisted and she stopped trying to hide it. "Oh God," she said, "oh God." Emma stayed where she was, close but not touching, not softening it. Sarah was grateful for that, even while it hurt. Memories kept coming now, quick and ugly. "Don't worry, Dad, I'll handle it." "No, you stay home, I've got it. It's easier if I do it myself. You don't need to bother with that." At the time, each sentence had felt practical, loving even. She had thought she was protecting him from stress, from effort, from disappointment, from feeling old. Now all she could hear in those sentences was subtraction. "Step back, sit down, stay out of it, let me take over." She had not just helped him, she had replaced him. She pulled in a breath too fast and it caught painfully in the center of her chest. "What do I do?" Emma answered without hesitation. "Ask him for help." Sarah looked up through tears. "Not because you feel sorry for him," Emma said. "Because you actually need him. That's all he wants." Sarah shook her head once, like maybe it could not be that simple. "But after everything—" "Yes," Emma said, "after everything." The wind moved through the parking lot then, colder now. Sarah felt it through her coat and along the damp skin of her face. Somewhere nearby, a car door shut. A few students were still leaving in pairs, talking softly, but their voices sounded far away. Sarah looked back toward the classroom windows. The lights inside were still on. Through the glass, she could see empty chairs, tables, the shape of a room where her father had mattered for 2 straight hours, in a way he no longer mattered in his own family. He looked... She stopped, because the right word almost hurt too much to say. Emma waited. "Alive," Sarah finished. Emma's face softened at that. "He was." Sarah let out a shaky breath. She could feel shame in her body now, not just as an idea. It sat low and heavy in her stomach. It made her skin feel too tight. It made her want to drive somewhere and keep driving. But under the shame was something else, hard and clear. She had been wrong. Not a little wrong, all the way wrong. They had treated Harold like the problem to solve, when the real problem was what happened to him after everyone stopped needing him. Sarah wiped her face again, slower this time. "I thought the notebook meant he was slipping," she said. Emma looked at her steadily. "No, it meant he was holding on." That landed too. Sarah nodded once, then again. Her chin trembled, but she managed to keep it steady after that. "Thank you," she said. Emma gave a small shrug, though her eyes were still sharp. "Don't thank me yet. Go home and think about what you're going to change." Sarah almost laughed at that, but it came out as another broken breath instead. She walked to her car with legs that felt unsteady under her. Her fingers shook so much she dropped her keys once before getting the right one into the lock. Inside, the car smelled like old coffee and the hand lotion she kept in the console. She shut the door, and suddenly the silence pressed in from all sides. She did not start the engine. She sat there with both hands on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield at nothing. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then more. The heater stayed off. The car slowly cooled around her. Her cheeks dried stiff from tears. Her shoulders began to ache from the way she was sitting. But she stayed there anyway. Every few minutes, another memory came. Harold reaching for grocery bags while she said, No, I've got it." Harold asking if she wanted help hanging shelves in the guest room, and her answering, "It's okay, Dad. I already hired someone." Harold starting to offer advice about her old washing machine and Sarah cutting him off because she was in a hurry. Harold standing in her doorway after bringing over a toolbox she never opened. Each memory left a physical mark. A fresh drop in her stomach, a pressure behind her ribs, a heat in her face. By the time the clock on the dashboard told her an hour had passed, Sarah understood something she could not soften anymore. She had not just failed to notice his loneliness. She had helped create it. She had stolen his purpose one polite sentence at a time. "You made me useless." Sarah sat across from Harold at the kitchen table on Saturday morning with his notebook in both hands, holding it carefully now, like something breakable. Sunlight came through the window over the sink and fell across the table in a pale square. Harold had been up since 6. He had already made coffee, already rinsed his cup, already sat in silence long enough to hear the refrigerator turn on and off twice. Now Sarah was here in the same chair where she used to sit as a teenager doing homework, and the notebook was between them again, but this time she was not holding it like evidence. Harold watched her fingers rest along the bent cover. She looked tired, not just from lack of sleep. Tired down in the face, around the eyes, like something inside her had shifted and not settled yet. He sat with both forearms on the table. The wood felt cool against his skin. His left shoulder still carried a dull ache from sleeping on it wrong. He could smell coffee in the room and toast from the neighbor's house, drifting faintly through the screen door. Outside, somewhere down the block, a lawnmower started up and then cut off again. Sarah cleared her throat. "Dad," she said, and then stopped. Harold waited. She looked down at the notebook instead of at him. "Why didn't you tell us you were helping people at that class?" Harold looked at her for a long moment before answering. He could see that she wanted the truth now, or said she did. But wanting the truth and being able to stand it were not always the same thing. "'Cause you wouldn't have believed me," he said. Sarah lifted her eyes. "You would have said I was bothering them." A small line appeared between her eyebrows. "That's not true." Harold let out a breath through his nose. Not quite a laugh, not quite anger, something older than both. "Really?" He sat back a little in his chair. The movement pulled at his lower back. He let the discomfort stay there. "When I fixed Mrs. Chen's shelf," he said, "you said I was being nosy." Sarah's mouth tightened. "When I wrote down the mailman's limp, you said I was obsessing." She looked down again. Harold watched the truth land on her in pieces, not all at once. First the memory, then the shame, then the understanding of how it must have sounded from his side. The silence between them stretched, not empty, full. Harold could hear the clock on the stove, hear Sarah breathing too carefully, hear the old pipes give a soft knock somewhere in the wall. Finally she said quietly, "I thought I was helping." Harold looked at the notebook in her hands. The pages inside it held grocery store notes. Names, limps, shelves, small things nobody else thought mattered. And then, later, his own name. Again and again. Not because he liked the look of it. Because some days he needed proof it still belonged to someone. He rubbed one thumb against the edge of the table. "You know what you did?" he said. Sarah looked up. "You made me useless." The words came out flat. No raised voice, no sharp edge. That made them heavier. Sarah went very still. Harold kept going, because once he had said that much, there was no use stopping halfway. "Every time you took something out of my hands," he said, "you told me I couldn't do it anymore." Sarah opened her mouth, but he did not let her in yet. "Not because I couldn't, because you were scared." That hit harder. He saw it in her face. Saw the quick hurt, then the need to defend herself. Then the way even that dropped, because she knew some part of it was true. "I was scared you'd get hurt," she said. Harold nodded once. "I know." Her voice rose a little, not angry, just desperate to be understood. "I was scared you'd fall, or forget something, or make things harder for yourself." Harold looked at her and felt a tiredness move through him that had nothing to do with age. This was the tiredness of saying something true too late. After years of it living unsaid in the body. "From what?" he asked. "From being a person?" Sarah flinched. "That's not fair?" Harold leaned back and looked toward the kitchen window for a second. The light outside was clean and plain. No drama in it. Just morning. He thought of all the little things Sarah had taken over in the last 2 years. Carrying groceries, calling repairmen, telling him to sit while she reached for things on high shelves. Saying, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll handle it," in that brisk voice she used when she thought she was being kind. He turned back to her. "From falling," she said again, "from forgetting something." "From living," Harold said. Sarah's face tightened. "You were protecting me from living." "That's not what I meant." "I know," Harold said. He said it softly, and that made her eyes fill faster. "But that's what you did." Sarah looked down at the notebook. Her fingers tightened around it so much the cover bent a little more. Then she loosened them at once, like she had caught herself hurting something fragile. The room felt warm, but Harold could feel a chill at the base of his neck anyway. His body always did that in hard conversations. The skin cooled first, then the chest tightened. Then the hands wanted something to do. He kept his hands flat on the table. Sarah swallowed. I didn't know it felt like that. Harold looked at her. Of course you didn't. He did not say it cruelly, just plainly. You were doing everything for me, he said. You never stopped to ask what it felt like to be on the other side of that. Sarah's shoulders folded inward a little. She looked smaller than usual sitting there. Not younger, just smaller. Her voice, when it came, was thin from holding back tears. I thought if I made life easier, that was love. Harold stared at the grain of the table for a moment. He understood that. That was the worst part. Sarah had not done it out of contempt. She had done it out of fear and love, and the common mistake people made when they started to see age as a list of dangers instead of a person still inside a body. But understanding it did not undo it. Sometimes easier isn't better, he said. Sarah nodded once, then pressed her lips together hard. A tear slipped loose anyway. She wiped it quickly with the side of her thumb. The lawnmower outside started again. Somewhere a dog barked once, then twice. In the kitchen, the coffee pot gave a soft ticking sound as it cooled. Sarah looked at him through wet eyes. I'm sorry, Dad. Harold held her gaze. He believed she meant it. That was not the question. The question was what sorry could do. Sorry doesn't give me back my purpose, he said. Sarah closed her eyes for 1 second. Harold felt his throat tighten around the next part, but he said it anyway. I have to find that myself. She nodded again, but her face changed when he said it. That was the part that hurt her most. Not that she had made a mistake, that she could not fix it for him with one apology. There was no quick repair here, no neat way to put the thing back the way it had been. Harold knew something about repairs, some things you could tighten, some you could realign, some you had to replace, and some damage stayed visible even after the function returned. Sarah set the notebook down on the table at last. She slid it toward him slowly, like returning something that had never belonged in her hands. I went to the class, and she said. Harold's eyes lifted to her face. He had not known that. She gave a small, miserable laugh that broke halfway through. I stood outside. I watched you. Harold said nothing. I saw that girl hug you. Jess. The memory came back at once, her thin shoulders under his hand, her face wet with tears. The way she said, You saved me. Harold felt the echo of it now, low and warm in his chest. Sarah looked at the notebook. I never see you like that at home. Harold's first instinct was to say nothing, to let her sit in that. But the truth had already started, and once truth got moving, it usually wanted all the room. At home, he said, there's not much left for me to do. Sarah's face crumpled again, but she kept herself together. He went on, You all decided what I needed before any of you asked what I wanted. Her breathing changed, shallower now. She was trying not to cry too hard in front of him. I know, she whispered. Harold looked at her and felt something complicated move through him. Anger still. Hurt still. But also the old reflex of wanting to make it easier for her because she was his child. Even at 45, even now. He did not make it easier. That would only be another lie. Sarah stood up too quickly, then steadied herself with one hand on the back of the chair. I should go. Harold nodded once. She wiped under her eyes and picked up her purse from the floor. The strap caught on the chair leg for a second. Her hands were shaking enough that it took her 2 tries to free it. At the doorway to the kitchen, she stopped and turned back. I do need to talk to Michael, she said. Harold looked at her, waiting. Not about putting you somewhere, she said. About what we did to you. The words sat in the room after she spoke them. Harold did not answer right away. He could feel his own heartbeat in the hollow of his throat. Not fast, just heavy. At last he said, All right. Sarah nodded once. She looked like she wanted to say something else. Maybe another apology, maybe a promise. Maybe I'll do better, but she seemed to understand that this was not the morning for more words. So she left. Harold listened to her steps move through the house, then to the front door open and shut. A second later, through the window, he saw her cross the driveway with her head down, one hand already reaching for her phone. He sat alone at the table again. The notebook lay where she had left it. He pulled it closer and rested his palm on the cover. The cheap cardboard was warm where Sarah's hands had been, cooler at the edges. He sat there a long time without opening it. The house was quiet, but not the same kind of quiet as before. This one had weight in it. Things had been said that could not be unsaid. Hurt had been named out loud. Sometimes that made a room feel emptier. Sometimes it made it more honest. Harold did not know yet which kind this was. But when Sarah got home, he knew what she would do. She would call Michael. And this time, the conversation would not be about facilities or supervision or what to do with Harold Chen. It would be about what they had already done. We need to fix this. By Sunday afternoon, Harold could feel the meeting in his body before anyone said much at all. Michael stood by the window, instead of sitting. David sat on the edge of the couch with both hands clasped so hard his knuckles looked pale. Sarah was in the chair nearest Harold, her back straight, her jaw set, like she had come here carrying something heavy and had decided not to put it down halfway. The living room was quiet except for the low hum of the air vent and the faint rattle from an old lamp when the system kicked on. Sunlight came through the blinds in narrow lines across the carpet. Harold sat in his armchair with both hands on the worn arms of it, feeling the small tremor in his fingers that came sometimes when he was tired or angry or both. On the coffee table off to one side lay the brochure Michael had brought before. Golden Meadows Assisted Living. Folded, untouched. Sarah looked at her brothers first, then at Harold. "We're not here to talk about putting Dad in a home," she said. Her voice was steady, but Harold could hear how much effort it took. "We're here to talk about how we made him feel like he doesn't matter." The sentence hung in the room. Michael shifted his weight at once. "Sarah, that's not..." She cut him off before he could build himself into a full argument. "When's the last time you asked Dad for help with anything?" Michael stopped. Harold watched his eldest son's face change. First irritation, then the quick mental search. Then that blank pause people got when the answer should have been easy and wasn't there. Michael said. His throat moved. "I don't remember." Sarah turned to David. David didn't even try. He just shook his head once, small and miserable, and looked down at his hands. Harold sat very still. He had imagined this conversation different ways over the years, usually late at night when the house was too quiet and his mind wouldn't stop. In those private versions, he always said less, or more, either silence or fury. But now that the real moment was here, what he felt most was a deep, tired clarity, like pain that had finally decided to stop hiding. "You stopped asking when Mom died," he said. All three of them looked at him. Harold kept his eyes on Michael first, then David. "You decided I was fragile." "I'm not." Michael's face tightened. "We didn't want to burden you." Harold let out one short breath through his nose. "Burden me?" he said. "Asking for help is not a burden. It's a gift." No one spoke. "It means you trust me," Harold said. David's eyes filled first. He looked away fast, pressing his lips together, but it didn't help. His breathing changed, shallower, rougher. Harold could hear it from the chair. Michael rubbed a hand across his mouth. "We thought we were doing the right thing." Harold looked at him for a long second. "You were doing the easy thing." Michael lowered his hand. "There's a difference," Harold said. The words landed hardest on Michael. Harold could see it. Michael always wore control like a pressed shirt. Today it had started to wrinkle. His shoulders had been high since he walked in, but now they dropped a little, not in relief, but in shame. His face had gone pale around the mouth. He looked like a man who had built his case carefully and realized too late that every part of it pointed back at him. David broke first. "I'm so sorry, Dad." The words came out wet and uneven. He bent forward, elbows on his knees, one hand over his eyes for a second, like he could stop himself from crying if he just blocked the room out. He couldn't. Harold looked at him and felt his own chest tighten. He did not want this. Not exactly. He had wanted truth. He had wanted to be heard. But there was always pain in the room once truth finally showed up. David lowered his hand and looked at Harold with red eyes. "I didn't know. I thought we were being kind." Harold nodded once. "I know." That only made David cry harder. Harold looked at both sons now. Kindness without respect is just pity. The room went still again. "I don't want your pity," he said. "I want him to be your father." Michael sat down at last. The motion looked less like a choice than something his body did because standing had become too hard. He leaned forward with his forearms on his knees, hands hanging loose for a moment between them. Harold noticed that his fingers were shaking too. Sarah watched all of it without speaking. Hope and hurt kept moving across her face in quick, quiet shifts. She had started this. Harold knew that. She had turned the room in the right direction and was letting it stay there. David scrubbed both hands over his face and inhaled hard. "I really thought checking on you was enough." Harold's voice stayed calm. "Checking on me is not the same as needing me." David looked up. "I don't need sorry," Harold said. "I need you to need me, even if it's just to ask what kind of oil to put in your car." That caught David off guard enough that a laugh almost came out through the tears. But it broke in the middle. He shook his head. "I don't even know what oil my car takes." Harold looked at him, and for the first time all afternoon, something loosened in the room. "Exactly," he said. "That's something I can teach you, if you let me." David gave a wet, embarrassed nod. "Okay." Michael sat back slowly. His hands had come together now, fingers locked, thumbs rubbing once against each other and then stopping. Harold knew that gesture. Michael used to do it as a boy when he had something honest to say and hated that it might sound weak. I didn't know how to do this, Michael said. Harold waited. After Mom died, Michael said, staring at the floor, you got so quiet. You stopped calling as much. You looked... He stopped there, jaw working once. You look smaller. Harold felt that one in his stomach. Michael kept going because he had already started. And I told myself the right thing was to make life easier. Handle things. Keep problems off your plate. I thought that was care. He looked up finally. I can hear now how bad that sounds. Harold held his gaze, and it was care. Michael blinked. It just wasn't respect, Harold said. Michael closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, something in him had given way. Not collapse, not self-pity, just the end of his defense. I'll try, Dad, he said. I'll really try. Harold believed him more, because he said it quietly. Sarah finally spoke again. Her voice was softer than before. We need to fix this. Harold looked at her. She was looking at him directly now. No managing, no explaining around him, just looking. Michael followed her gaze to the coffee table. The brochure sat there where it had sat through the whole conversation, glossy and stupid and suddenly smaller than the damage it represented. Michael stared at it for a second. Then he leaned forward, grabbed it off the table, and crushed it in one hand. The paper fought him a little with that thick brochure stiffness, then caved in with a rough crackle. No one stopped him. He stood, crossed to the kitchen, and threw it in the trash. The sound it made hitting the bottom of the can was light, almost nothing. But Harold felt it anyway. A small release. A decision with weight. When Michael came back into the living room, he didn't sit by the window this time. He took the chair closer. David took a long breath and wiped his face with both hands. His voice was still rough when he spoke. I'll call you every week, Dad. Harold looked at him. And not just to check on you, David added quickly. I'll ask for your advice, I promise. Harold nodded once. That was all he trusted himself to do for a second. Because something was happening in his body now that he had not expected. The tightness in his chest had eased. The trembling in his fingers, the one he had been quietly trying to hide by keeping his hands braced on the armrests, had slowed. Sarah noticed first. Harold saw her eyes drop to his hands and stay there. Her face changed when she saw they were steadier now. Not perfectly still, but steadier. She looked back up at him, and he knew she understood. Not everything, not yet, but enough. They sat in that silence for a little while, all four of them, with the late afternoon light shifting across the carpet and the vent humming and the house holding something new inside it. Not peace, exactly. It was too early for that. Too much had been said. Too much still needed to change. But it was not the old silence anymore. It was the kind that comes after a wall cracks and daylight gets through. Harold rested his palms flat on the chair arms and looked at his children. For the first time in a long while, none of them were talking about what to do with him. They were talking about how to come back to him. That's what I'm here for. 2 weeks later, Harold was setting a borrowed camera on the table when he heard the classroom door open behind him and a voice he knew better than any other. I signed up for the class. He turned. Sarah stood just inside the doorway with one hand still on the strap of her bag. She looked a little out of place among the younger students with their cameras and coffee cups, an easy way of walking into the room. But she was here. Really here. Not outside the window. Not calling afterward. Inside. Emma looked up from the front table and smiled like she had been expecting this. Harold kept one hand on the camera. For a second, he did not say anything. He just looked at Sarah and let the surprise move through him. It started in his chest, warm and strange, then spread outward until even his hands felt lighter. Sarah took a few steps closer. I want to see what you do here, she said, and I want to learn from you. The room around them still had its usual sounds. Chairs scraping, camera straps brushing against tabletops, someone laughing too loudly in the back. But for Harold, everything narrowed for one moment to Sarah standing there and saying the words he had waited years to hear in one form or another. He smiled before he could stop himself. It was not a big smile, just enough that Sarah saw it and relaxed a little in the shoulders. She sat down beside him. The chair legs squeaked against the floor. Harold looked at her hands as she set her notebook and pen on the table. Teacher's hands, clean nails, a small ink mark near her thumb. Hands always busy doing for other people. Tonight they were empty in a different way. Ready. Sarah gave him a small sideways glance. I should have done this a long time ago. Harold looked at the front of the room, then back at her. Done what? Sat next to you, listened to you, learned from you. He held her eyes for a second. Then he nodded once. You were busy. Sarah looked down. That's not an excuse. Harold's smile faded, but not because he was upset, because he knew she meant it. No, he said, it's not. Emma called the class to order and began talking about framing and composition. Harold listened with half an ear and watched Sarah with the other half of himself. She held the camera too carefully at first, like she was afraid of pressing the wrong thing. He recognized that. Everyone started there. She frowned at the settings, tilted the camera, adjusted the strap, looked at the screen, then at him. Harold leaned a little closer. His knee touched the metal leg of the table. "You're gripping it too tight." Sarah glanced at him. "I am?" "Yes." She loosened her hands. "Better," Harold said. Emma walked between rows, giving instructions. Jess, 2 tables over, looked healthier than she had the night she cried. Still tired around the eyes, but steady now. She had brought prints with her tonight. Harold had seen them when she walked in. Real pictures, honest ones. Halfway through the lesson, a student near the back made a frustrated noise. "My battery door won't stay shut." Emma turned, but Harold was already up. He moved toward the student with the slow, sure pace Sarah remembered from childhood. The pace that meant something broken had entered his field of vision, and his whole body had already started solving it. He took the camera gently, turned it in his hands, checked the latch, pressed the edge once with his thumb. "Broken clip," he said. The student groaned. "Can it be fixed?" Harold looked around the table, then into the supply drawer near Emma's desk. He found a rubber band and a short piece of tape. His fingers still knew how to work fast when something practical needed doing. Loop, hold, press, secure. The rubber band held tension where the clip no longer could. The tape kept it from slipping. He handed it back. "Not pretty," he said, "but it'll get you through class." The student tested it, blinked, then grinned. "It works." Sarah watched from her seat with her mouth slightly open. Harold saw that too, and something in him straightened. Not for show, just old muscle memory. This was how his body had always responded to need. Eyes clear, hands steady, mind narrowing to the problem in front of him. Jess raised her hand from across the room. "Harold, can you look at my composition?" He went over. She showed him a picture on the screen, a chair by a window, too centered, too careful. "What do you think?" she asked. Harold bent a little to see it better. His lower back complained, but he ignored it. "You're standing too square to it." Jess shifted the camera. "Like this?" "No, move left, a little more, now lower." She crouched slightly. "This?" "Closer," Harold said. "You're still being polite to the room. Don't be polite. Choose what matters." Jess changed the angle again. The frame tightened. The light landed differently across the chair. Harold nodded. "There." Jess looked at the new image and smiled. "That's it." Sarah was still watching. Harold could feel it without looking straight at her. Not the old watchfulness, not fear. Something softer, something more honest. She was seeing him work, not remembering it, not being told about it, seeing it in real time. Emma clapped her hands lightly to get everyone's attention again. "Okay, before we wrap up, I want to say this in front of everybody." The room quieted. Emma stood at the front with one hand on the table and looked directly at Harold first, then at the class. "Harold is the reason this class works," she said. "He's not a student, he's a teacher." A few people nodded right away. Jess did. So did the student with the repaired camera. Someone in the back said, "Yep." Heat rose into Harold's face again, but this time he did not look away as fast. Emma smiled. "We couldn't do this without you." Harold stood there with everyone looking at him. He felt Sarah beside him, Jess across the room, Emma at the front. The students with their cameras half lowered in their hands. For a second, he did not trust his voice. His throat had gone thick. He looked at Sarah first, then at the students, then at Emma. "That's what I'm here for," he said. The room stayed quiet for one beat, then someone smiled, then another, and the whole thing eased. Emma laughed softly. "I know." Class ended a little later. People packed up slowly, still asking Harold last questions on the way out. Sarah stayed beside him while he helped one student adjust a strap and reminded another not to force a jammed button. Jess paused before leaving and held up one of her prints for him to see again. He looked at it, nodded once, and she smiled like the nod mattered. It did. Outside, the night air had a clean, cold edge to it. Sarah drove Harold home in her car. The heater hummed low. The dashboard lights made her face look softer than it had under the classroom fluorescence. Harold sat in the passenger seat, with his hands resting loosely in his lap, feeling the good kind of tired in his shoulders and knees. For a while, they just drove. Then Sarah said, "So?" Harold looked over. She kept her eyes on the road. "About the sink." "Sit." He waited. She gave a small breath that sounded almost like nerves. "I have a question. My sink is leaking. Can you look at it tomorrow?" Harold went still. It was such a simple sentence. Ordinary, practical, small enough that another person might not have noticed the weight of it. But he felt it all the way through his body, in his chest first, then lower, like a locked part of him had just opened. He looked at her hands on the wheel. Steady, but not casual. She meant it. She was really asking. For a second, he could not answer. Then he said quietly, "I'd love to." Sarah smiled. It was not dramatic. Just a real smile, brief and warm, and a little ashamed at the edges because both of them knew what it had taken to get here. But it was the first time she had asked him for help in 5 years. Harold looked out the window so she would not see too much on his face. After another second, he added, "Finally, something real to do." Sarah laughed softly. Yeah. When they reached his house, he got out more slowly than he used to, but his body felt lighter than it had in a long time. Inside, the kitchen was dark. He turned on the small light over the sink and set his notebook on the table. He sat down. The chair gave its familiar creak. The room was quiet again, but it did not press on him the same way tonight. He opened the notebook to a blank page and held the pen above it. He did not write his name. Instead, in his careful block letters, he wrote, "Today my daughter asked me to fix her sink. She needs me." He looked at the sentence for a long moment, one hand resting flat beside it. Then he closed the notebook gently and left his hand on the cover, feeling the truth of it there. Someone called because they needed me. 3 months later, Harold's phone rang at 7 o'clock on a Sunday night while he was standing at the kitchen counter rinsing a plate. The sound cut through the house, sharp and clear. He turned off the water, dried one hand on the dish towel, and looked at the screen before picking up. Michael. Harold answered on the third ring. Hello? There was a short pause on the other end. Then Michael said, "Dad, my lawnmower won't start. What do I check first?" Harold stood still with the phone to his ear and the damp dish towel still in his other hand. For 1 second, he said nothing. Not because he didn't know the answer. Because even now, 3 months into this new shape of things, there were moments when the old ache in him still expected every call to be about medication, appointments, or whether he had remembered to eat. A call like this hit different. It landed lower, deeper. It made his chest feel warm and tight at the same time. He set the towel down on the counter. "First," he said, "don't keep pulling the cord like a maniac. You'll flood it." Michael gave a short laugh under his breath. Too late. Harold smiled a little. "All right, start with the spark plug. Take it out and see if it's dirty." On the other end came the sound of a door opening, then Michael's footsteps, then a hollow garage echo. Harold could picture it without trying. Concrete floor. Mower angled near the wall. Tools hanging where Michael probably did not use them enough. "I've got it out," Michael said a moment later. "What am I looking for? If it's black and crusted over, that's your problem." A pause. "It's black." "There you go." Michael exhaled. "I feel stupid for not knowing this stuff." Harold leaned one hip against the counter. His lower back had been bothering him that afternoon, but now he barely felt it. "You're not stupid," he said. "You just never learned. That's different." Michael was quiet for a beat. Then more quietly, "Can you teach me?" The question settled into Harold's body like weight set down after being carried too long. His fingers tightened once around the phone. Not from pain, from feeling. "That's what fathers are for," he said. He walked Michael through the rest of it step by step. Clean the plug. Check the fuel line. Look at the air filter. Make sure the gas wasn't old. Harold could hear Michael moving around as he worked. Metal clink. Drawer slide. Small curse. Then, another sound that made Harold smile before it even finished. The mower caught. Not on the first pull, on the second. "There it is," Harold said. Michael let out a breath that came out half laugh, half relief. "It started." "Good. You were right, it was the spark plug." Harold nodded, though Michael couldn't see him. "Most things tell you what they need if you stop and look." Michael went quiet again. Harold could hear the mower still running in the background. Then Michael said, "Thanks, Dad." Harold's throat tightened around the simple words. "You're welcome." They hung up a minute later. Harold stood in the kitchen with the phone still in his hand. The room was quiet again, except for the refrigerator hum and the ticking clock on the stove. The plate was still sitting in the sink with soap bubbles drying around the edge. On the table, his notebook lay where he always kept it now, not hidden, not carried around like a lifeline anymore. Just there. He walked over, sat down, and opened it. The chair gave its familiar creak under him. His knees ached a little from sitting too fast, but he hardly noticed. He took his pen and wrote in his careful block letters, "Today someone called because they needed me. Not because they had to, because they actually needed me." He looked at the sentence for a while after he finished it. His phone buzzed once on the table beside him with a short text from Michael. "It's running, thanks again." Harold did not answer right away. He didn't need to. The feeling of it was already there, warm under his ribs, steady and real. A little later, Sarah came over for dinner. She knocked once and let herself in with the key he had told her to keep. Harold was at the stove heating soup. The kitchen smelled like onions and broth. Sarah came in carrying a paper bag from the bakery and a large flat envelope tucked under one arm. "You're early," Harold said. Traffic was light. She set the bakery bag on the counter. Harold glanced at it and saw rolls. Then he looked at the envelope. "What's that?" Sarah smiled a little, but there was nerves in it too. "Something I want to show you." They ate first. Not a big dinner. Soup, bread, cut fruit. The kind of meal that did not ask too much from either of them. They talked about ordinary things while they ate. A student in Sarah's class. A neighbor's barking dog. The sink he had fixed at her house last month. Still holding fine. Each small subject seemed to settle them both further into something easier. After dinner, Sarah wiped her hands on a napkin and pulled the photograph from the envelope. She slid it across the table toward him. Harold picked it up carefully. It was him, not posed, not looking at the camera. He was standing in the classroom, slightly bent toward Jess, one hand pointing at the screen on the back of her camera. Jess was looking where he pointed. Emma was blurred in the background. The light caught Harold's face from the side, enough to show the lines, the age, the thin white hair, but that was not what hit him. It was the expression. Focused, present, patient. Useful. He had not known he looked like that. For years, the version of himself he carried in his mind had been the one from quiet rooms and reflective windows. A man sitting too much. A man moving more slowly. A man waiting. This man was different, not younger, not stronger, just fully there. Sarah watched his face while he looked at it. "I took that 2 weeks ago," she said. "Emma let me move around the room for a while." Harold kept his eyes on the photograph. "You look happy, Dad," Sarah said. He swallowed once before answering. "I am." Sarah's voice softened. "For the first time in a long time?" He nodded. "Why?" she asked. Harold looked from the picture to Sarah, then back again. He could feel the answer in his chest before he said it. "Because I'm not just taking up space anymore," he said. "I'm filling it." Sarah's eyes went wet at once, but she smiled through it. She had learned finally not to break the moment by fussing over him. She let the words stay where they were. After a second, she said, "I'm entering this in a contest, with your permission." Harold looked down at the photo again. His own hands in it were visible. Broad, lined, still steady. Jess's face beside him, intent and trusting. It was a good photograph, because it told the truth. Not that he was impressive, that he mattered to the moment he was in. "You can enter it," he said. Sarah let out a breath. "I'm good, but only if you put my name on it." She laughed softly. "Of course." Harold set the photo down on the table between them. Harold Chen, photography assistant. Sarah laughed again, fuller this time. "Deal." The phone rang before either of them said anything else. They both looked at it. Harold reached first. "David," he answered. "Hello?" Dad, David said, sounding embarrassed already. "How do I know when to change my brakes?" Harold leaned back in his chair. Sarah smiled and looked down at her lap. And Harold saw the smile spread before she could hide it. Not because David didn't know, because now he was asking. "You hear grinding?" Harold asked. "Not grinding, more like a squeal." "All right, how long's it been since the pads were changed?" "I have no idea." Harold nodded to himself. "That means too long." David laughed weakly. "Probably." For the next 20 minutes, Harold talked him through it. What to listen for, how the pedal should feel, why waiting too long cost more later. David asked more questions than he needed to, and Harold answered everyone. At some point, Sarah got up and quietly began clearing the table, but she kept glancing back at him while he talked. He could feel the life of the call in his body, the way his spine stayed straight instead of sinking, the way his mind moved cleanly from one detail to the next, the way the words came easier when the words were useful. At the end of the call, David went quiet for a second. Then he said, "Dad?" "Yes, I love you." Harold stared at the photograph on the table while he listened. The picture showed him smiling slightly, though he had not remembered smiling when it was taken. "I know," Harold said. "That's why I'll always answer." When he hung up, the kitchen was quiet again. Sarah had finished stacking the bowls in the sink. She stood there, with one hand resting on the counter, looking at him, then at the photograph, then back at him. Harold picked up the photo once more. He looked at the version of himself Sarah had caught in that room. Not a burden, not a patient, not a problem to manage. A man helping someone. A man in motion. A man needed. He set the photograph down beside the notebook and rested his hand near both of them. Later that night, after Sarah had gone home and the dishes were done and the house had settled into its usual silence, Harold opened the notebook again. He read what he had written earlier. "Today someone called because they needed me. Not because they had to, because they actually needed me." He did not add his name below it. He closed the notebook and sat in the kitchen looking at the photographs Sarah had taken. The phone was quiet now. No voices, no new questions, just the small sounds of the house at rest. But the quiet no longer felt like proof of absence. It felt like a pause. He knew the phone would ring again tomorrow. Maybe Michael with another machine. Maybe David with a car question. Maybe Sarah with something in the house. Maybe someone from class. And when it did, someone would need him. That was enough.